Hi, Black Cat Recapped here. Today I am going to explain a comedy movie named My Secret Billionaire. At the start of the movie, we meet a man named Ferro Olivetti. He wasn't born rich but worked really hard to become a billionaire. He grew up in Italy with his dad and then moved to the United States, where he became super successful. Even though he had lots of money and women around him, his dad worried he'd never find true love. One day, Ferro gets a call that his dad is dying, so he rushes to Italy to see him one last time. His dad asks Ferro to go live far away from his wealth and live without any money for at least a month, like he was homeless. Ferro didn't want to agree at first, but seeing his dad dying, he couldn't say no. After his dad passed away, Ferro leaves his mom after expressing his love and care. It was a tough decision for Ferro to leave his business for a month because every hour he spends away could mean losing millions. He changes his look with his driver, so nobody can recognize him during his trip. We meet a rude man on the plane who causes trouble for the flight attendant. She gets back at him by playfully hitting him with a potato, which makes everyone laugh. Ferro arrives in the city carrying a bag and gets a ride from a truck driver. Meanwhile, the same rude man takes a taxi with a mysterious, polite woman. Ferro tries to get a job at a local store, but the owner looks at him strangely and refuses to hire him. Ferro finally gets to a bar and starts eating the free snacks meant for customers. A woman approaches him and asks questions about where he's staying and what he does for work. He answers nervously and indirectly, which annoys the woman, and she leaves right away. Suddenly, a woman who seemed eager to meet attractive men sits beside Ferro and learns that he needs a place to stay for the night. Later, Ferro arrives at an apartment with Peta and notices the same woman, who was driving earlier. Peta tries to convince Ferro to have some romantic moments, but he makes excuses, and they fall asleep. Ferro can't sleep because of Peta's snoring, so he goes outside and looks at Diane, waking her up. She calls for Peta, who throws Ferro out, even though they both found him attractive. While Ferro is alone on the streets, two thugs try to rob him, but he fights them off and hides. Unfortunately, Diane calls the cops on him. When he leaves the hiding spot, the cops arrest him and put him in a local jail cell. After calling his assistant to buy $50 million worth of shares, Ferro is moved to another cell, where he encounters a big criminal who starts a fight with him. The cops see this and remove the criminal from the cell. This was too overwhelming for Ferro, a powerful man. However, he remembers the promise he made to his father. The next morning, Ferro wakes up and asks if he can stay until breakfast, but the cops don't listen and let him go since the thugs from last night were arrested, confirming his story. Ferro is really hungry, so he tries to trade 50 cents and a pack of rubber for food at a local store, but it doesn't work out. Meanwhile, a mysterious woman walks home followed by a creepy man, making her uneasy. When she gets home, she calls for her mother nervously. Inside, her mother wants her to meet a guy for a date, but she refuses because something in her past makes her afraid of dating. At night, Ferro sits on a bench and meets a strange woman who makes him leave. The next morning, he goes out to find food, and a hot dog seller gives him a free hot dog after seeing he has no money. While Ferro looks for a job in the newspaper, he's hit by a car unexpectedly. There, the guy listens to Ferro's story and decides to help him. He takes Ferro to his boss's house, who needed a driver. Inside, Ferro sees the boss and his wife arguing. The boss asks Ferro to sit and offers him $600 for driving and other tasks, while his wife looks at Ferro with desperation. Suddenly, their spoiled daughter shows up asking for $500, which the boss gives without hesitation. The rude man asks for Ferro's references and tells him to leave, but the wife hires him as a bartender for the night. That night, people treat Ferro badly, making things tough. He's also asked to take a drunk man home. Ferro tells his assistant to give each employee a $5,000 bonus because they almost won a court case against someone who sued them for unknown reasons. When Ferro returns to his room, Mrs. Curtis is sitting there, and then his drunk daughter arrives, trying to take advantage of him. To make matters worse, Mr. Curtis comes into the room and asks Pharaoh to sit beside him. When Mr. Curtis tries to do something strange to him, Pharaoh refuses, saying he might have a disease. He tells the daughter to leave, and then the wife comes in with a smile. The next morning, even their dog does something odd. It seems like the whole family is desperate. Pharaoh goes to his boss's office to help him out and is surprised to find the same woman from the apartment there. Everyone seems impressed by his charm. Later, there are flowers on the woman's desk, and she gets a call from the boss to meet him at his house. Pharaoh looks at Diane with surprise, and the boss asks Pharaoh to drive her to the funeral after her meeting. Inside the car, Pharaoh looks at Diane in the mirror, and she scolds him for it. They finally reach the funeral of her relative, whom she never liked, and they laugh at the priest's antics. They both decide to have coffee together. At first, the conversation doesn't go well, but Pharaoh makes it better by suggesting she should date someone, since she told him her husband David died 9 years ago. They talk for about 2 hours and seem interested in each other. She also says she's been wanting to leave her job because her boss is mean. She offers to lend Pharaoh some money, but he refuses for obvious reasons. Before dropping her off at her parents' house, they kiss while her parents watch. They plan to go on a date the following Tuesday. Her parents aren't happy that she's dating just a regular driver. The next day, she goes on a date with Pharaoh, while also working on her project because Mr. Curtis gave her extra work. A few days later, Mr. Curtis's daughter comes to the office, leading Mr. Curtis to call Pharaoh into his office and fire him, accusing him of something he didn't do. Diane can't stand seeing Pharaoh insulted and angrily speaks out, shocking everyone. They leave the awful office, and Diane invites Pharaoh to have dinner with her parents, which he agrees to. When her parents hear the truth about what happened at Curtis's office, they become concerned and talk to her privately. They were worried about Pharaoh not having a job, but they didn't know he was a billionaire. During dinner, Pharaoh mentions he might move to California soon, which makes her parents feel a bit better. Later, they're seen enjoying ice cream together. She calls her friend and tells her about her relationship with Pharaoh, which surprises her friend. Pharaoh leaves Mr. Curtis's house and says goodbye to his wife. The next day, Diane suggests they start their own agency with the money she saved over the years, but only if Pharaoh joins her as a partner. They discuss the business, and Curtis offers a great plan for the agency, which they agree to. Love is in the air as they celebrate together. It seems like Pharaoh and Diane's dreams are coming true as they slowly fall deeper in love with each other. While they were heading back, Pharaoh told Diane that he never met anyone like her before. Finally, they have romantic moments, but Diane isn't feeling comfortable for some reason. She shares a story about the days when she was trying to find out why her husband passed away and got contacted by someone. Something terrible happened to her then, and the creepy guy who caused it died from an overdose soon after. After Pharaoh comforts her, we skip ahead to 2 weeks later, where their agency is making lots of money. While sitting in a park, Pharaoh suggests he might leave soon. Diane asks if they can open the agency in California instead, but Pharaoh worries about her business here. Later, he gets a call from his assistant saying if he doesn't show up in court this time, the company will lose control. While watching fighter planes, Diane tells Pharaoh she loves him. It's the court date, and the judge gives them a deadline until Monday. So if Pharaoh doesn't make it to court on Monday, he'll lose control of the company. We're taken to the scene where Pharaoh's assistant is in front of the judge, but Pharaoh is nowhere to be found. The other team is about to win the case when suddenly Pharaoh shows up. It only takes a second to confirm his identity, and they win the case. He comes back and meets Diane, but when she asks where he was, he doesn't answer and keeps it a secret. This makes her run away from the office, followed by Pharaoh, but she's too caught up in her emotions to stop. Pharaoh calls her parents' house many times since she dropped her phone in the mud earlier, but her mother doesn't tell her about any of the calls. Finally, Diane returns to the office, but this time Pharaoh isn't there, and it seems like he's gone for good. Meanwhile, the guy who helped Pharaoh get a job tells Mr. Curtis that he gave Pharaoh a check for $50,000 and that Pharaoh is a billionaire. Pharaoh talks to his mom about Diane, and she tells him to go see her. After he tells her what's going on, but doesn't mention being super rich, they share a passionate kiss. Diane didn't want him to go and asked him to visit him in California. He then asked her to come with him, which made her dream come true. Finally, we see them heading to California, but Diane still doesn't know that Pharaoh is a billionaire. They finally arrive in California, where Pharaoh's real driver picks them up. Diane looks very confused, and soon he reveals the truth to her that he is Pharaoh Olivetti. This was really shocking for her. They arrive at Pharaoh's large mansion, and he gives her a tour. Diane says she'll be searching for a job, but billionaire Pharaoh has different ideas. He tells her he loves her and wants to make her his partner in everything, just like she made him hers in business. We see them getting married in front of everyone, and then they lived a happy life together.